Good evening, and welcome to the Special Select Board meeting. It's a public forum on water and sewer rate structure. Today's Monday, March 29th. I'll start by reading a remote script regarding this meeting. I'm Select Board Chair Tom Wacusa, and I'll be confirming that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Strange.
Here.
Steve Morantz.
Here.
Richard Foster. And Mark Gold.
Here.
Okay, so Richard is he having sound issues?
Richard's just coming in now. And I also had someone ask if you could just speak a little louder, Tom.
All right, let me check my mic. I can turn this up a little bit. Is that a little louder? Is that good? Okay, so we're just waiting for Richard Foster to check in.
Yeah, I'm checking in, Tom.
Okay, thank you. And then staff, when I call your name, please respond the affirmative. Lynn Simons.
Present.
Paul Pasturzik.
Here.
And Mark Barbieri.
Here.
Mark Barbieri. Excuse me. Your speaker's off, Mike.
Oh, here.
Okay, all right, great. And then we have some speakers on the agenda, which would be Mark Gold, and then our other speaker is, let me get this here. I should have gotten one more, but it is Kurt Friedman. Okay, so this open meeting of the Long Meadow Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth. In order to mitigate the transmission of COVID-19, we've been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all public meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order which you find posted with this agenda materials for this meeting allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless participation is required by law. And this meeting will feature public comment. The Select Board meeting is convened by Zoom webinar posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. There is no chat or Q&A function. For residents' comments, use the Zoom webinar format of the public or attendees. If a member would like to speak during the president comment, please raise a hand, use the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. The meeting moderator will unmute you and give you permission to speak. If you wish to join the webinar by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Members of the public who wish will be asked to identify their names and address, and each member will be afforded 3 minutes for comment, but given this situation for the hearing, there may be folks who want to speak a little longer. But we ask you to keep it somewhat brief. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. All the materials for this meeting are available on the agenda posted on longmeadow.org. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. The ground rules of this meeting: I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any responses, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So the first order of the agenda is old business to discuss a document we all received about the diff percentage capture. And I guess I would turn that to Paul Pasturzik.
Yes, just very quickly, the two issues under old business are things that kind of fell through the cracks that are just caught at the 11th hour. This district improvement financing is a standard annual vote that the board needs to take. What it does is basically says that the taxes at the diff 20 over on Dwight Road, that we're only going to use 90% of those incremental taxes, because that's basically all that we need to pay the debt service for FY22. The FY22 debt service is $180,000. The tax bill in FY21 for that diff was nearly $210,000. And doing the math and taking the incremental amount, we only need about 90% of that. The other 10% will remain in the general fund and can be, again, it'll be part of the excess capacity. But this is more of a procedural matter that annually has to be done. And again, it had kind of fallen through the cracks and not been presented to the board at an earlier date.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Paul regarding this? Okay, so pretty much standard, because we took out a loan to redo the streets at the end of Converse Street and Dwight Road, and then we're paying back the loan with the money that comes from the taxes from the property there, the Medical Arts Building. So if there's no questions, I guess, do we?
There is a vote that's in the middle of the correspondence that I sent that actually could be moved by one of the select board members and voted on.
I'll move that the select board utilize 90% of the Dwight Road Improvement District's incremental tax revenues in establishing the fiscal year 2022 district improvement financing budget.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Do we need to read? We don't need to read the rest of that, right, Paul?
No, that's it. That's the vote.
Okay. Any other questions on the motion? Okay, then we'll do a roll call vote. Mike Barbieri, will you vote?
Mr. Lechusa?
Yes.
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Thank you. And now the next issue is the warrant. We need to look at, there's a couple of articles. And so the first one we just taken care of, right?
Well, no, the Article 26 is a separate article. While it's directly related to that diff vote that was just taken, this actually sets up the budget and has town meeting makes the appropriation for the actual debt service on that diff loan.
Okay. So when we approve the budget, we would approve this item, or when we approve the total warrant, we could just approve this, right? Or do we need to?
If you want to approve the total budget as is presented, that's fine. I'll leave that up to you folks.
Okay, so the warrant, so we can either do this, and then Article 27.
In the past, we've adopted each article one by one. I'd like to make a motion. We include the proposed Article 27, which is the diff budget.
Actually, 26 first, Mark.
Okay, I'm sorry, 26.
26, okay.
Which is the diff budget in the town warrant.
Okay, and do I second? Steve Morantz, are you seconding that?
No, well, I thought at our last meeting, we approved all the warrants with the exception of the zoning issue, which was subject, we took it out subject to approval by the town attorney. Otherwise, I thought we approved everything in the warrant. So this new one, if these new orders come in, I think it's just we approve the whole 9 yards, finding out what the story is with the zoning warrant, whether town council said, yes, we can take it off, which is what we voted to do at the last meeting.
Okay, so then, but this motion is just for, we'll do a motion for 26 and then 27, then we'll move on to the zoning one. So,
I'll place a motion to second.
all right, well, it's seconded. So, do you feel, Stephen, do you have a problem with us taking a vote on this?
No, well, as I said, if we wanted to vote the whole thing over again, that's fine. But we did do this before. If we want to have these two articles voted on separately, fine.
Okay, good. All right. Any other discussion? All right, then why don't we just do a roll call vote? Mark Barbieri?
Mr. Lucusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Foster,
Yes.
All right. And then Article 27 is to establish a funding limit for the town's Council of Aging revolving fund with payments to be expended by the Director of the Council of Aging up to $85,000. And this is one that slipped up by us. And we need a motion to add this to the warrant.
I'll move we include Article 27 in the annual town meeting warrant as printed.
Okay, the second?
Second.
Any further discussion on this? Hearing none. Mike Barbieri, will you do roll call vote?
Mr. Lucusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Foster.
Yes.
Right. So now we would go down to the last article that it should, I'm trying to think where it is here.
Article 40.
Article 40, okay. And this is, we've discussed at our regular meeting regarding the vote to change the zoning district and the land that basically holds the first church property that is near the shops. And so we would try to decide if we're going to do this now or if we're going to do it in a future meeting. We did have town council look at this, and basically they didn't say anything that differed from our view of it. But Lynn, would you want to report on the town council?
Sure, yes, I did get an opinion from Attorney Belcher-Timmy. The select board there's nothing in the state law that compels the select board to place this on the warrant. It's within the select board's discretion to choose to place it on the warrant or not.
Thank you. So any further discussion or comments by the board on this? Okay, we had the last time we had a major zone change was with the Brewer Young Mansion. And at that time, the applicants for the zone change actually paid for the town meeting. And we know that the cost of this one would be about $10,000. We haven't heard from them that they would pay for it. So that's not putting on the agenda and moving it to a special meeting.
Tom, we
Yes.
voted not to have it on the agenda pending the verdict of town council. Town council says we don't have to put it on the agenda. So I'd assume this is done. We voted not to put it on the agenda, subject to town council. We didn't put it on it's not on the warrant. I don't, it's a done deal.
I didn't understand it that way, no. I thought we decided not to put it on it pending the discussion, the explanation provided from town council. So it's just, this article would be treated similar to the other two articles that we just added to the warrant.
I have the same recollection as Mr. Morantz, that we voted not to have it on unless the town council told us that we needed to. The difference between this and the other two is the other two articles that we just talked about were not anywhere considered previous to this. They were just omissions that we are now correcting omissions. This is not an omission. So my understanding is the same as Mr. Morance's.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? All right. Well, I guess I was mistaken when I thought that this was open for a discussion. Because I thought we were under some requirements to discuss this in terms of putting it on at this point in time. As I had mentioned last time, my view is that I would rather have something like this on a meeting where the majority of the town are going to be present, which is an annual meeting, so we could have some good representation from people who are either for or against this. And the other thing is that I see that putting this on is part of our duty. What I'm holding here is a report from the Ceiling Task Force dated June 19th, 2019. And the Ceiling Task Force basically says, one of the goals is to increase the tax base. And number 3 on there is the church property near the shops, to making that increase in the tax base happen. So, I know we can't stop it. It's going to happen eventually, but I thought we were going to discuss this and perhaps put it on the warrant this time. Mark Strange.
Yeah, hi, Tom. Can we get clarification from Lynn or Paul or Mike about, what was at the March 15th meeting? Because I'm of the opinion that this should be on the warrant, but if we've already voted to take it out, I don't really think we have any options here.
Yes, I also had it as, and I had to go back and rewatch the meeting a couple times. I had it, and I think Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, that it was voted to take it off the warrant. We listed it on here in the warrant in a box with an explanation. So tonight was merely to provide the public the attorney's opinion, because otherwise they would not have had that information in a public meeting. So it was merely to follow back up from the directive at the March 15th meeting to seek legal guidance on whether or not the select board had the authority to place this on the warrant or not.
Thank you.
Okay. So then it looks like we need a final vote to approve the warrant, the total warrant, or is every item has been voted on already? And so is that already done, or do we need a final vote?
Well, the way that I would look at it is that everything is voted on. What is presented before you, Article 40, would now be deleted, and that would be the product of the final warrant, which would need your signatures.
Okay. And is that the intent of the board to do that?
My intent.
You're asking me. I don't know.
Okay, then I guess that's it. So we'll just have to add our signatures, and that'll be it. So, and which means that there will be a special meeting, a town meeting set up to make the zone change in the near future.
That may not happen. They may be willing to wait till the fall town meeting. I wouldn't presume there's going to be a special town meeting. I mean, when we did the Brewer Mansion, when we did the Long Meadow Shops the first time, it was at the fall town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So don't presume that we need a special town meeting. That's up to the petitioners.
Yes, it is. Okay, so we'll see what happens. Eventually it'll come before the public. And so that is it. So we can move into our next item on the agenda, which is
Tom, normally you would take a vote to close the warrant.
That's what I thought. Yeah. So I would like to do that Do I have a motion?
Yeah, place a motion on the table to close the warrant.
Okay, and with a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, Mark Barbieri, will you take a roll call vote?
Mr. Luchusa?
Yes.
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Okay, so now we look at our water and sewer rate discussion and public forum. And I will turn it over to Mark Gold, who's our first speaker. And he may want to do a screen share or something, I'm not sure. Mark, it's all yours.
Thank you, Tom. I'd like to share my screen. I don't know if it's enabled yet, but it will. I have a very short, well, I'm not sure how short presentation, but what I'd like to do is do this in the form of an open forum so that if there are questions and people want to raise their hands, we should probably stop as we go rather than go through this whole thing and try to look for questions. So if anybody has any questions, I don't know if it's Mike or Lynn, if you need to let me share my screen.
Try it. Is it not letting you?
Yeah, it says it's still host disabled.
It's not letting me give him access either.
And I think it's because of the way I came in.
Could be poetic justice.
Okay, Rich. This is going to be pretty short.
1 second. I can do this. There you go. You should be able to share now.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So what I was going to do, this is the same slideshow that I had at our last select board meeting. I was going to go through it in a little bit more detail, and there are a couple of additional slides that I wanted to focus on because I think they tell the story. And this is based again on work that Rich Foster and I did over the last, I think, 4 to 6 weeks. The goal was to identify and evaluate an alternative measurement system for determining residential sewer volume. And we used the water bills from July 1st, 2019 through June 30th. That's the fiscal year 2020 water bills for the 5,441 residential users. We had monthly data readings that we used. And so the data we have is the data for that period of time. There's all kinds of, caveats about that. The last couple of months we got, and were the beginning of the COVID-19. People were at home. We had a dry summer. We had a wet summer. Whatever it is, it's that year's worth of data. But it turns out that it's a representative year because it is a year. So we're going to go through it. I also just wanted to share one slide again, because I think it's important. We're talking about water in terms of units, water use in terms of units. I'm trying to kind of give people a perspective of what a unit is. And I have one unit is 748 gallons of water, but 220 units, that's our cap. We stop charging sewer after you use 164,500 gallons of water. And just for a reference, if you have 10,000 square feet of lawn space and you watered it a half an inch 3 times a week for a month, you use 50 units of water for that month. So that's just a good calculation to keep in mind. 50 units is pretty liberal watering. We've got a lot of people above that and a lot of people below that. We looked at 3 billing systems that we looked at. We compared them all to our current system, which is the 220 unit maximum. And again, because there's 220 unit maximum, our current sewer rate is 266. It's a maximum charge of $585. There's a citizen's petition to allow for the use of secondary water meters, which would be borne by residents. It was put in. And Mr. Foster proposed something called winter averaging, which we would look at just some months in the winter and say, because there's no irrigation systems used in the summer, in the winter time, that's probably going to be your household usage of sewer demand or sewer burden during the summer. Just so you know where we are, we called that option 1. This was option 3, and the reason it goes 1 and 3 is because we have another one, option 2, which is the winter maximum. Rather than winter average, I was concerned that during the winter time, there are people who go away, have months with 0 usage, and I thought if you looked at your winter, the highest use in the winter probably reflects what you used in the summertime. Again, I'm not reading the slides precisely. I'm going to presume that folks here can read the slides. We're calling this one option 2. So if you look at the current sewer charge methodology, I just want to make sure that people see that, the sewer base is based on what goes in must go out, but it's not quite correct on what goes in must come out, because we don't necessarily do that. Again, we don't think the basis for sewer volume should necessarily apply to water used for irrigation. And we, as a town, try to compensate for irrigation water by putting this 220 unit cap on the units of water. So if you use more than 220 units of water, you don't pay sewage on the additional water under the assumption that it goes down the irrigation system and not down the sewer to Bondi's Island. We bill semi-annually, but the actual sewer flow to each home is unknown and pretty much unmeasurable as sewer flow. We can measure water into your house, but we don't measure water going or sewer going out of your house. Again, the sewer volume equals the measured water usage. And once the 220 cap is reached, you don't have any accrue any more charges. The current water volume for the 5,441 units or residences was 760,000 units of water. But because of that sewer cap, they were only billed on sewage for 671,000 units of water. So there's about 100,000, it's actually 90,000 unit difference that exceeds the cap that we're not billed on. There's also some commercial customers. Commercial customers are, we assume they do not have irrigation systems on their water usage, and they use water and therefore sewer at about 72,000 units. And just so everybody knows where we come, at the time we set the budget for the sewer department, Mr. Pasterzik comes to us and says, we need to raise X number of dollars. And he says that in the past 5 years, we have an average sewer volume of, in this case, it would be 743,000 units. And so we take the amount we have to raise, divided by $743,000. We say we're going to set a sewer rate of $2.66. The only thing we can be certain of, we will not use the amount of sewer units that we use in the calculation. It is always more, it is always less, but that's why we have a sewer fund as part of our sewer system. We have a fund that we use as, if you will, surge, or for capacity if we charge less than what we need to run the sewer department. Again, I repeated the 585 units. So if we look at some of the alternatives, each of the evaluated options is an effort to charge people more accurately the actual volume of material they cause to go to Bondi's Island. Again, when I use the term irrigation, it doesn't include watering your lawn. It doesn't include water you might use to wash your cars. It doesn't include water some people use to fill swimming pools. Anything that doesn't go down Bondi's Island, we're considering irrigation water tonight. Okay. The new rate proposals more fairly represent an individual resident's actual share of sewage treatment costs. Again, they were all result in 671,000 units that we use, that we bill for. Those 671,000 units, the number will go down. And remember the way I said we calculated the rate. We took how much we need to raise and we divided it by the volume and came up with the rate. So if the number of units goes down, we have to raise the same amount of money. So therefore, the sewer fee or the rate must increase. So under all these scenarios, the sewer fee will go up. But the fees don't tell the full story because not all irrigation water people will benefit from putting in a secondary meter. And everybody who says, but the rates are going to go up by 30 or 40%, in many cases, their units that they get billed will go down by a commensurate 30 or 40%, sometimes more, sometimes less. So you can't tell just by the rate what's going to happen to these people's or to any individual person's sewer costs. Low volume and non-irrigation system users will pay more in each proposed system than they do under the current system, with the comment being that the amount of money that they are paying towards sewer fees right now is being subsidized by the people who are paying for sewer fees on water that's not going down the sewer, that's not going to Bondi's Island. So again, just quickly, we evaluated every customer during every scenario. We evaluated by user size. We didn't re-rank them afterwards. And so I just wanted to go through and take a look at what the benefits and disadvantages are, benefits, advantages, and disadvantages of each of the systems. The current system is obviously pretty simple. It's easy-ish to understand. Single system for everybody out there. Okay, what are the drawbacks? Big year-round users underpay for sewer use. People are paying sewer fees for irrigation water. Again, define irrigation as anything that doesn't go to Bondi's Island. 20 was an arbitrary number. Certainly doesn't capture the true sewer burden, and irrigation users are subsidizing the sewer revenue. And doesn't encourage water conservation. This is a quick chart that just shows if you can see my cursor here, this green chart is actual water use by customers. And you can see that there are about 980 customers who use far more than 220 units of water. Some customers use upwards of 800 units of water a year, but their sewer is capped at 220 units. So everybody down in this end, above that 913th customer, 920th customer, they're paying for all the water they use. These folks are not paying sewer charges on all the water they're using. So the first option was one that's proposed in a citizen's petition to allow for the installation of secondary irrigation meters. And what it says is that anybody who wants to can put in a secondary meter, and you don't include sewer charges on what goes through the secondary meter. The biggest problem is that the town has no way of knowing or limiting who puts in a secondary meter. So we could approve secondary meters, and we could have one person put it in, or we could have 5,000 people put it in. And so it was really questionable of how do you evaluate the impact of secondary meters if you don't know how many people are going to do it. And so we took a couple of assumptions, and we'll go through them, but we settled on it being anybody for whom it has a 5-year or less payback. So if you can get a 5-year or less payback by installing a secondary meter, and we think that's about an $850 investment, then we said people may very well go do it. Now, if you've got a 10-year payback or more, it's not likely you're going to put in that secondary meter. It just doesn't pay. Okay? Residents would have to purchase and install their second meter themselves, and anybody who installs a second meter would be charged for all the water that goes through that second meter, all the water that goes through their first meter, but only sewage on what goes through their first meter. So again, we looked at a couple of different scenarios. Like I said, we looked at the top 5% do it, the top 10%, the top 25%. But what we did is we settled on this, what we call scenario 1E, installation of a secondary meters by everybody who can get a payback in less than 5 years or less. Okay? So what are the advantages of secondary meters? Obviously, it ends being billed for water that's used in irrigation. It uses measurement, not an estimate of the sewer demand for homes with irrigation where you put in a second meter. But the drawback is obviously it costs homeowners $850. And the problem is that the impact isn't known to the town because we don't know how many people are going to install the secondary meter. If it attracts about 15% of the residents, they'll benefit. And it only benefits those residents who put in a secondary meter. And the assumption is that we would keep the 220 unit cap because not everybody can or wants to put in a secondary meter. So we keep that 220 unit cap for everybody else because of the increase in your rates. That means that the irrigation water will essentially be reduced by 23%, so rates would go up by 23%. Surprisingly enough, what we find is that the largest users will still be at the 220 unit cap. They won't benefit from, some of the largest users won't benefit from a secondary meter. And now instead of paying, 220 times $2.66, they'll be paying 220 units times $3.23, which will take their rates way up. Okay, so this is the summary of that. There's 1,190 homes that we calculated would have a 5-year or less payback. Again, the current system, there's 671,000 volume at 266. With this option, the volume would go down, so the rate would go up 328, 23% increase. Interestingly enough, people who are now at the 220 unit rate or 220 unit cap, instead of paying 585, would pay 721. They'd actually have their rates go up 23%. So the bottom line is the people who put in meters pay less and everybody else pays more. Everybody else pays 23.3% more. Okay. And if you don't put one in, it's fine, but some people are going to say, well, I'll then put one in. The problem is not everybody who puts one in gets a payback, and a lot of people who put one in will get very, very long-term paybacks. So again, if you look at this is kind of the summary of who installs the meter, who pays more, who pays less. It's just a note that 7% of the people, the accounts would only vary by about $20, but they would pay more or less. This is the chart I'm showing, and it's very complicated, but I'm trying to get the point across here, is that each one of these lines represents 1/120th of the population of the residents. So line number 1 represents the top 271 water users. Line 2 represents the next 271 users, or 272. So it's about 270 users in each line item. And what it shows for each line item is that you would think that, the big users all win, but they don't. What happens is some of them actually pay more. And you can see a bunch of them pay that $136 more. Some of them save a lot of money. They save a lot of money. But throughout the usage, even though you could say, well, what's the average increase, or what's the average savings? I just picked 3 examples here. We're going to take this third line, which represents kind of a 3/20ths of the way down. The average user there would see a decrease in their sewer bill of $128.35. But some people would see an increase of $136, and some people would see a reduction of as much as $493. Pretty surprising. Similarly, you get to the middle of the pack here. The average user would see an increase of $41. But the maximum person would see an increase of $78. But some people could see, if they had a secondary meter, they could see a reduction of $322 in their bill. But when you get down to the end, the bottom here, everybody sees an increase. What this says is, the least person here is still going to see a 30 increase. The least increase here is $42. Everybody sees an increase. Nobody sees a decrease down here. So this is the system that shows you that don't assume that only the top users benefit from a secondary meter. There are people down in the 15th tier who will save as much as $47 or $50 a year by, somebody here will save $184 a year in this 14th line, putting in a secondary meter. Okay. So that was the secondary meter thing. And I think that if I had a conclusion on secondary meters, it would be people who can afford to put in a secondary meter, for whom it is justified, will save money, and everybody else will pay 23.3% more. The next scenario we looked at was the winter average issue. And just the sewer volume was calculated with winter averages, and residential bills, sewer bills will be calculated using this method. But what would happen is once we went to winter average, we'd do away with the 220 unit cap. One of the concerns is residents with zero water use in all or part of the winter months would have a calculated average that would seem lower. Rich Foster has looked at this, and I think he'll say something a little bit later about making a modification to this so we do not have zeros, but this calculation was done with the zeros. And so this is an example I have of a user here, and it seems ridiculous, but here's somebody who uses a lot of water in the summertime, not much in the winter. In fact, it looks like they go away in December and January because there's no water used at all. You can see it starts going up again in June, July, and August. This group has a winter average of 2. Okay, this bottom set, you can see where their winter average is a little higher, has a winter average of 12. So just so you can see it at monthly usage, where they are for their winter average. I also put down, what their maximum would be if we used the winter maximum. Okay. So we looked at a bunch of scenarios for winter averaging. We started out with the 3-month winter average that Rich started looking at. We looked at a 5-month winter average, and we looked at a 7-month winter average, which was a suggestion of Tom Shea, one of our residents, to look at a 7-month winter average. And when we did that, we actually found that 5-month winter average looked like it was the sweet spot. Why is that? Because 3 months had some zeros and you couldn't get rid of them. With 7-month average, what we found is that we were catching the tail end of a lot of irrigation in both October and April. If you look at the 7 months we consider were October, November, December, January, February, March, April. There are people who still irrigate in October and people who start irrigating in late April. And that was in the 7-month average. But 3-month average was too short. 5-month looked like the real sweet spot of this. What are the advantages of it? It's obviously fairly easy to implement. It's more representative of your actual summer usage than a 220 cap. It's widely used. It spreads the cost of service across the entire user base. One of the disadvantages is it requires some operational changes, some things in our system to do the billing, but it doesn't require a secondary meter. One of the things is if you use true winter averaging, residents who go away all or part of the winter will have an artificially low calculated number. Again, Rich Foster's comment is we're going to assign a town-wide winter average or minimum to these accounts. And I think that compensates a lot for this winter average issue that we identified. It will require some computer adjustments to address the issues. Again, like anything else though, it estimates summer sewer usage. We do not and cannot calculate actual or measure actual summer sewer volume, and it doesn't encourage water conservation. But when we go through the calculation, what we can see is that, apologize. What we can see is that the sewer volume, which is our currently 671, goes way down. It drops to 324,000 units. So therefore the fee has to go up because this times this has to equal 324 times 523. Okay, so it's a 96.6% increase in the fee. But again, don't get burned by or get hung up on the fee because the amount of units goes way down for most people. Okay. Again, under this scenario, 3,000 people pay more, 2,300 people pay less. You can see it's far more people pay less than under the secondary meter, and they do so without having to invest in a secondary meter. Again, this is the summary. And again, where the secondary meter had 6% of the customers within $20, this one is about 9% of the customers are within $20 of their current bill. The same kind of a chart here. It's a busy chart, but again, it shows that even down near the bottom, there are people who will save money. People in our lowest segment here can save as much as $120 on this. Yes, they'll have a bigger bill, but so people save across the board from top to bottom, from our highest users to just about our lowest users, will save under a winter averaging system. Whereas, a secondary meter system only saves people who put in the secondary meter. Obviously, some of the average costs change. Okay, the average costs go down for this group of people in the top, 8/20ths of the group. The average cost goes up here, but you can see it goes up. It goes up $40 or $60. But even so, there are people who are saving money on the deal. And I just wanted to let you know that it's across the board that people can benefit from this. The third option we have was one that I looked at when I saw it. I called it winter maximum. And I took winter maximum because I wanted to take into account any zeros during the winter. I wanted to make sure those didn't account for it. It said, if you have a month during the winter where you use 3, 4, 5, whatever units it is, that's probably your usage in the summertime. Residential sewer bills calculated this method. So unlike the secondary meters, the whole population isn't segmented and everybody takes advantage of this opportunity. What's this say? That says we took option 2, set the maximum sewer volume during any of the summer irrigation months at 110% of the maximum water used during the 5 winter months, November through March. And again, we used November through March. That's the 5-month sweet spot that we saw there was no irrigation. Selected 110% of the maximum to take into account that people do more loads of wash in the summertime. People, take more showers in the summertime. People may do more loads of dishwasher in the summertime. So it bumps it up just a little bit, tweaks the winter average a little bit. Again, there would be no 220 unit cap once this is put in. Again, we looked at a bunch of scenarios here, and you can read through these, whether we use 3 months, 5 months, 7 months, 110% or 100%. And we chose scenario 2E, at least I chose that, to look at, to evaluate. If you do care, we have the analysis of all of these scenarios. They've all been done equally. And frankly, they don't change that much from one to another as much as we thought. Obviously, it can be implemented across the entire town, doesn't cost the homeowner any capital improvements, and zero water usage during partial month or a full month doesn't impact the calculation here. So here's some more benefits. It's more representative summer sewer use, encourages water conservation as customers can impact their summer sewer bill by conserving water year round. 5-month maximum ensures no irrigation months are included. It does require operational changes just like the winter average. The 110% maximum usage hasn't been scientifically measured or calculated. But the summary here is pretty straightforward. Again, as you can see, the units go down. They go from 671 to 412, and therefore the unit cost goes from $2.66 to $4.12. It's a 54% increase in the fees. So remember, the secondary meter was a 32% increase in fees. The winter averaging was about a 98% increase in fees. This winter max is a 55% increase in fees. Okay, excuse me. And again, the numbers are almost identical to the winter average numbers. About 3,000 people pay more, and about 2,000 people pay less. A little bit better than the secondary meters. This is again the summary of the customers with changes. We call this number within $20. It was 6% with the secondary meter. It was 9% with the winter averaging. It's 10% with the winter maximum number. Okay. And again, the same slide, again, a very busy slide, but again, the intent is to show people that the average costs will change throughout the system from the highest to the lowest person in town. There are potential savings if you use water for irrigation because it will only pick up your non-irrigation water using this process. Savings can be substantial. Even the lowest people can save as much as $106, $63. Down here, the big users can save a lot of money if they only use water for irrigation. The average impact, though, is this column here that shows the average cost. And you can see that for the lowest people, the average cost goes up about $17. The average cost up $34. that kind of thing for the people in those segments. And again, each of these lines represents approximately 270 users. So this slide is the summary of all three of those options. It kind of brings them all together. You can see what the residential volume rate is here, the total volume usage, what the fee would be, and the fee increase. But again, this is all based on maintaining equal sewer revenue. And that's the whole basis for this thing. So that's really the summary. We didn't draw any conclusions saying you must go to this or we ought to go to this. We haven't even made any recommendations. Clearly, Rich Foster and I kind of disagree on the winter averaging versus winter maximum. Although I will say that I think it's fair to say that we both agree that the secondary meter has far more drawbacks than benefits for everybody in the town, except for the 1,190 people who want to pay the money to put in a secondary meter. We found a lot of other things, and it's worth mentioning it to the select board. It's not so pertinent to the setting sewer rates, but the water readings need constant scrutiny by the water department. We've seen so many examples, and I think Pete Thurber has confirmed this, that we have monthly data that's kind of fluky at a town, that in a house that people aren't looking for. We have people who are using just gobs of water, that probably something ought to be looked into, or they ought to be notified about that. So we think there should be a monthly review of readings. And we think that we ought to come up with a system that has exceptional activity or exceptional reports where those 15 or 20 or even 50 houses that may have developed a leak somewhere that month get notified about it. Also saw a significant variation in water use. The conclusion of this statement of significant variation is, it's kind of the old saying, all generalizations are false, and which means, it's tough to make generalizations about sewer use and water use because there's so many variations. There are people who use a lot of water in some areas and not in others. But so we really think you need to look at the bulk of them as much as you can. So having done that, that's really my what I've gone through. That's where I am with the summary. And again, the three options that we looked at relative to the base are winter averaging, winter maximum, and the secondary meter. And with that, I'll open it up for questions and or let Mr. Foster make any comments, because I know he's done a lot of work on this as well.
Well, we did get some questions. The town manager has some folks. So why don't we start with Evan to direct questions to you. Lynn, can you facilitate?
Yes, I will go down the list and just move people over. So first is Tom Shea.
So Mr. Shea, just give us your name and your address.
Tom Shea, 81 Green Meadow Drive. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. So first and foremost, Mark, thank you for condensing the previous version. Given that this is given by a select board member, if we could get a, if you will, public copy of the condensed version would be appropriate.
Yeah, I think it was in the documents that were distributed with the meeting. So,
well, I think I had the 53-page version.
That was the last meeting. For this meeting, you got the short version.
I thought this one had 53 also. Tom, or Lynn, you may want to.
Okay, we'll get you this one.
Okay, then I appreciate this. So a couple of others. The 1/20th summary on various scenarios over on the far left. I assume that's usage in 100 cubic feet.
Correct. They're ranked by usage, correct, and then split into the top 270, the next 270. So each one represents about 270 users. Right.
Okay, I'm not sure we're gonna end all of this tonight. Probably not. So I would appreciate maybe if we can get those 1/20ths with the actual usage data. That would be helpful. People could kind of see where they stand, if you will, if that's not too much of an issue. You follow me?
Yeah.
So appreciate that. Next thing would be, I guess, 7 months versus 3, and in previous studies, as well as the one that the town paid for by DPC. I'm not wed to any of those, but, you know, that's another scenario that's been identified. And I guess one other thing, is Pete Thurber on the line tonight?
So I'm in the.
Yes, Pete's here.
Okay, if, Lynn, can you open him up so I can ask him a question? Is that proper?
Tom, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yep.
Thank you, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
Hello, Pete. Hey, Pete, I'm not looking to put you on the spot, but, you know, I appreciate the fact that the town's professionals are here. And Tom, I also appreciate you allowing this because the goal here is it's a public forum. Pete, there's been some concern here about, you know, what number of months to average, et cetera. And I think one of them, it revolves around the fringe months. You know, April, I'm happy we got water, you know, a little bit of rain today, so I'm not paying a sewerage fee on my sprinklers. But is October really a fringe month? Or, I mean, I get people put in new lawns, but hopefully they're not doing that every year. Is October really an outlier based on your knowledge?
Just from looking at a lot of the profiles that we look at, then we do get the complaints from, you know, people with the high bills, mostly from irrigation. You do see some usage in October. And then again, that can fluctuate, that varies depending on the season. If we have a very dry season, you know, a lot of people, they will overseed and, you know, aerate and overseed in that time period. But typically from the profiles that I look at all the time, I normally see irrigation systems shut off like middle of October, around that area. You know, some people will leave them on, but they're not running.
Okay. I just wanted to ask, I mean, like I said, I'm not wed to any period, but I'm also not looking to, if you will, complicate this and get the 5% on either end of the bell curve. Thank you. I'm good. Oh, one last thing. So I know, Mark, you said you're not wed to any of them. I guess, you know, we'll figure out later here how this goes forward, but it would seem that option 2E, which, you know, I appreciate that one and I want to have more discussion on it, but that did not seem, I guess you said, radically different than a winter averaging. And I'm not sure if option 2E has been used anywhere else. And I'm just looking at going forward, you know, explaining this to the average homeowner and keeping it simple. And Tom, just count this as my question period. I'll probably want to do a little more later. Thank you. But I'm good. Thank you, Mark.
Okay. And Lynn, did we have
Yes, I moved Ted into the panelist group.
and Ted, if you could just give us your name and your address.
He's on mute.
Okay. All right.
He's back into the attendance.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So thank you for taking my question, and I appreciate the detailed presentation there, Mark. That was very helpful.
Ted, can you just start with your full name and your address?
Sure. Ted Sluice, 25 Concord Road.
Thank you.
And my question is to maybe understand if I'm following the material appropriately, and if so, then maybe a concern I'd request the board consider. And I think looking at going through that material, I think I'd be in the category that this would benefit me. But I'm thinking also that there's sort of a control volume here, if you will, where there's a certain amount as a collective, as a town that we pay, and maybe what this is doing is sort of reallocating those costs between users or consumers, and maybe it's more equitable based on consumption. But I'm also maybe concerned that are we shifting that cost to individuals who maybe are less able to pay for it? And what I mean by that is two things. One, when you look at across the town, the homes that have irrigation systems typically are the larger properties. And the second is that irrigation, and I mean, I have it as well, but it's somewhat of a discretionary use. You can choose to water your lawn if you'd want it to look good or not. But for other water consumption activities, showering, clothes washing, things like that, that's less discretionary. And I'm just wanting to understand, am I following the material correctly to think that we are, if we do one of these options, whichever one, are we shifting that cost burden maybe to households that can less afford it? And maybe I'm misunderstanding that, but that's my question. I'm saying if I'm following that correctly.
Ted, you're not misunderstanding it at all. You're precisely correct. For example, somebody who uses zero irrigation, let's say it's a couple, they have no irrigation, and our findings is they're going to use between 2 and 3 units of water / sewer every month. Okay, they go away, they're here all the time. If they're a 3 unit per month user, that's 12 months, 36 months. At 266, they currently pay $95.76. Those same people will have their rates go up by either 23%, 98%, or 55% based on these 3 scenarios that I showed you, because they have no, differentiation between summer and winter usage, if you will. So from what you said, you have understood exactly whether these people are characterized as can't afford it more, can't afford it less. I don't know. I will also say that there's a thought process that says this family that I just described, this couple, or maybe it's a single person using 3 units, their sewer rates are being subsidized by the people who irrigate. And this system would remove those subsidies, if you will.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the explanation there. And I understand the subsidized perception, and I think I probably do some of that subsidizing. I would just maybe just ask the folks that are considering this to take that into account, because it seems like you could potentially step change those individuals' water bills if this isn't, say, phased in. And just, I think as an overall town, if we're making it more expensive to live here, just something to maybe keep in mind for certain folks in town.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tom, I'd like to add one thing. Ted, there's also a side conversation. Mark and I are just talking about sewage at this point, but there's also a side conversation that may unfold that we're going to talk about the water. And when we get into the water is when we could be counterbalancing the whole game with a tiered rate on our water usage. So it's not just the sewage. We haven't really tiptoed into the water yet. So you could see a compensation take place.
Okay, thank you.
All right, great. Lynn, do we have any other questions?
Yes, we have Jim Moran here now as a panelist.
Okay. Mr. Moran, name and address, please. You're still, there you go.
Yeah, Jim Moran, 48 Avondale Road. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, I'd just like to throw something a little different into the mix in terms of where things are at. I mean, I look at sewage in the same way as I look at trash. I get a certain volume of trash collected every day, and it's an increment, of town costs. And at some point in time, we're probably going to split this out with Proposition 2.5 going the way it is as a user fee. And part of where I see sewage and trash are both two things that are required by households. You know, no matter where you are or whatever, unless you have septic, you need sewage, and sewage provides a service. And I've heard comments by Mark Gold, who said that some of the burden on our sewage system comes from, certainly from sump pumps. If people take their sump pump effluent and put it directly into the sewage system. I've also heard from Mark, I think, Mark, if you correct me if I'm wrong, is that some downspout roof flow actually goes into our sewage system as well. And so those are really unaccounted for, all right, in terms of where it all goes, in terms of, the volume that goes to Bondi's Island, and we all pay for it, but those are ones that could be pretty significant inputs into the system. And so I have one proposal, I'll throw it out here, and it makes life a lot simpler, is if we just had a flat fee. If we took a single fee for everybody, all right, and maybe you want to separate it between residential and business, but that's a small part of the whole deal. But if you did that, it comes down to about $1 a day for every household in Long Meadow. I mean, I calculated with the numbers, and Mark, you can tell me if I'm wrong, something like between $330 and $350 a year. Quarterly, $90 a quarter. And from a household point of view, it's certainly an important part of how you function as a household. And, things like, again, the cost structure is also not just water or volume, it's BODs, solids, other things come into the factor. So if I'm a household that puts a lot of my food product down the disposer and dumps it at the Bondi's Island, that's another unchecked or unknown contribution to the system. So from an equity point of view, I look at a single fee. It would certainly simplify the whole burden on who's calculating what for what, in terms of, and cut down on the complaints from people in terms of, and my water bill is not what it ought to be, and I'm paying way too much, and the complaints, I'm sure, at town hall show up all the time, every time the water bill goes out. So I would just like to throw that into the mix here. I know we got lots of other options here that we're considering. I, for one, water my lawn. I like to have green grass, and I pay for my water bill. I mean, it's what it is what it is, and I talked to my landscape guy, and he basically says, if you let it burn out, it's going to cost you $1 thing to reseed it and get it back to where you want it to be. So it's, I pay it because I want the lawn in my front yard to look good. So I thought I'd just throw that in there and let let the powers to be here decide what you're looking to do. So I'd be interested in any comments that anybody might have about it.
Tom, if I could just make a comment, Jim, thanks for the comments. We looked at that very briefly. The cost per house would be about between $325 and $350 a house. And so when you look at the number of people who are paying, under $150 now, that's a more than doubling. And so it wasn't strongly considered. The other difference between what I'll call a trash fixed rate and the sewer fixed rate is that even with the trash, we found we had to put a maximum in. You get 35 gallons to fill every week. And if you go over that, you can go to the Big Y or somebody else and buy more bags. But there is no way to control the upper limit on sewer usage. And so the question would be, yes, we would cover our, $1.8 million current bill, but there's no way to maintain any kind of cap on that. We would think with that. So in addition to this, $325 or $350 per house, which is, trash right now costs every house about $250. That's about half of it is in the collection and half of it's in the disposal. So this would be 50% more than the overall trash bill for houses. But it's a great suggestion. We can certainly take a look at it more closely. I just wanted to let you, give you some of the numbers that we've gotten so far on that.
I mean, the only retort to that would be is if I'm a household and I only fill my garbage can up halfway, I'm subsidizing the people who stuff it to the hill. You know, I mean, you can look at it the same way. I mean, it's, to me, they're critical resources or utilities for households. And, you know, $1 a day for flushing your toilet 15 times, you know, sounds like a pretty reasonable thing, you know, in terms of where it's at. And that's where, in most households, that's where most of the effluent comes in the non-irrigation mode is flushing of toilets. So in my case, you know, I've got, you know, 2 people and I'm not flushing as many as someone that has 4 kids, you know. So again, you know, I'm not looking, you know, for me, it's, you know, either way we go, but I thought, you know, it's an option to make it simpler and more easily more explainable to people. I mean, I've been through all your slides, Mark, you know, and you've done a great job of trying to analyze the situation, the numbers and where it's at, but most people at town meeting are just going to go bleary-eyed, you know. I don't know. This looks like there's 30 people on this conference call. I doubt you're going to really, and we have issues of trying to get the message across to the, you know, the large predominance of people in our town. This one's going to go one way or the other, and you guys are going to make a decision, and people are going to have to live with it. So.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Moran.
Okay, thank you.
And Lynn, I know we have another presenter after Mark. And so is there anyone who is asking a question for the first time at this point?
It looks like Steve Morantz has a question.
Well, I want to address Mr. Moran's comment, because actually I agree. I think that some sort of flat fee, and for the people who don't use as much sewage, it's just part of living in our community. You know, as you said, if I don't use a lot of trash, I'm paying a trash fee. The question, though, and the problem, well, I think there needs to be, might be some sort of tiered issue, but it's the folks who use a whole lot more. And if they're just going to pay water rates and not sewer rates, something is a little off on that. So I think it needs to be looked at. I think the flat fee makes sense. I think I would hope that the board would look at it in some degree. It has been looked at in the past, didn't get anywhere. But it needs to be, I think it needs to be combined with some way, shape, or form usage, which is, you know, I mean, you know, you buy more trash bags, you know, you pay for that. I'm not quite sure how it works with sewage, but I think your suggestion is worthwhile looking at, and I would hope the board at least evaluates that a little further than it has to date. Thanks.
Okay, good. Mark, the only question I had was, you know, when you looked at that winter rate, you know, the 5 months, I know you looked at one would be the maximum usage. Did you ever consider using a medium? So like if you had zeros where there'd be a couple of, you know, months where people were out of town, and then you had the highest rate, and they just find the median, sort of like when we look at the median income of the country. Did you look at that?
Tom, I didn't look at that, but the equivalent to that is Rich's analysis of saying, you know, there ought to be a minimum. And it's, remember, when I say there ought to be a minimum, what we're saying is that for both the scenarios 2 and 3, winter averaging or winter maximum, what we're saying is that if your winter average calculates to 3, okay? If in the winter you use 0, you get billed 0. Okay. If in the summer you use 0, you get billed 0. If in the summer you use 2, you get billed 2. But if in the summer you use 5, you go back down to 3. So it's the lesser of your winter average or your actual usage, both in the winter and in the summertime. So Rich went back and looked at, you know, we should establish that for the summertime, the minimums are 3, not 0. So in the summertime, you know, if you use, you know, 50, you're going to get billed at least 3, not 0. In the summertime, if you're away and you only use 2, you're only going to get billed 2, because it's always the lesser of what you use or this calculated number.
Right. Well, a medium would drop off the bottom, low scores also. But another question I had is, in terms of people who have in-ground swimming pools, do those go into the sewer system generally? Any discussion on that?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know, because that would be something that people, if they might use non-house water, or irrigation water to fill their pool, but if it goes down a drain, so that would make a difference.
I don't think so, Tom. I don't think there's any pools that would be connected to our sanitary system because they're standalone. You would supply water to them from your hose bibs in your house or bring water in commercially, but there's no connection between that and the sanitary system.
And so, okay, that makes sense. All right, thank you. So if we can move on to our...
Tom, just before we move on, can we ask Pete Thurber? We had a quick conversation with him about how we would implement this in Munis and wonder if he got any answers from implementing these through the town billing system, just to get kind of a practicality put back into this before we move on.
Mark, we haven't got the full answers yet. We did find out late today that Munis does have a program, a winter averaging program, but we do not know what that details as far as cost, man hours, all that, and how, and just exactly how long it would take to do. But there is a program, kind of what we talked about, that, Munis does a lot, that there might be something like that. And they do have a program for winter averaging. And we've asked a lot more questions, but we just haven't heard anything back from them.
Thanks.
Okay, so I think, Lynn, unless there's any other questions from new questionnaires, maybe.
Tom, Mark Strange did have his hand up before, and I do see, there was Kurt Friedman wanted to speak, and Tom Shea, it looked like had his hand up again as well.
Right, so here's what I'd like to do. We could have Mark Strange make a comment, and then I'd like to have Mr. Friedman go right into his presentation, and then Mr. Shea can make comments after Mr. Friedman's presentation. So, Mark Strange, your comments.
Yes, thanks, Tom. And I just quickly, Jim Rand and I don't agree on everything, particularly not the best original members of the Big East Conference, but I do agree with him on this. I think that's a really easy, digestible, relatively fair way to administer this, particularly if we do it via quarterly billing, so it's not such an impact on the people that are paying $150 a year or whatever it is. I think that's a really good idea.
Great. Okay. Then if you can move Mr. Friedman into the presentation mode, and if Mr. Friedman, if you could just give us your name and address, and then you can talk about your water and sewer rate presentation.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you. So your name and address, please?
Kurt Friedman, 24 Ridge Road.
Thank you.
Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Kurt Friedman, 24 Ridge Road. I started trying to establish a fairness in water and sewer rates some 25 years ago. And this has been an ongoing effort to try to bring fairness and equity to all the residents of Longmeadow. Water is a necessity, a human right, and a public good. The main responsibilities of government is to ensure that people can enjoy sufficient, safe, accessible, and affordable water without discrimination. This shows the distribution of potable water use and potable and irrigation use in Longmeadow. About 2.7 persons per household, and about 80 to 90 units per home is typical. The overall distribution of water is very interesting. There's about 50 or 1% of the counts, 1% use greater than 750 CCF per year. So here's our large users. and everybody else falls afterwards. Our water use certainly is seasonal in nature, peaking between April and October. Shows a distribution of different types of water use, typically in a household. In Long Meadow, we have about 51% household, about 8% non-residential, and about 41% is irrigation on an annual basis. There's been previous studies of water use in Long Meadow. We had the 2007 Earth Tech report that came back with ascending water and sewer rates. And that met with a lot of dissatisfaction with the residents of Long Meadow. Then there was the 2008 Water and Sewer Advisory Task Force, and that's where the idea of the $360 a year flat charge was first established. In February 2009, we had the report by the town manager that went back and supported the 220 unit sewer cap and also the ascending water rates. And in 2011, once again, we came back with a $360 a year flat charge again. And I might add that in 2015, this came to a vote at the annual town meeting, and after significant public debate and presentations in the newspaper, that it was Article 23 was defeated. And it was defeated because it was determined that the $360 a year rate had several problems. It caused significant increases for many people, and also it significantly reduced the motivation for conservation. The problems with the existing rates. The 220 CCF sewer cap, in previous years has been actually more, and in other years historically it's been less. About 12% do exceed the 220 unit cap, and this results in an imbalance of about $900,000 a year. What are the proper rate-making policy objectives? James Bonbright, who's the author of Principles of Public Utility Rates, has established the following rate-making objectives. And this is true for electricity, natural gas, water, sewer. These are the general principles that have been universally accepted around the world. One is simplicity, simple rate design. Next, revenue and rate stability or neutrality. Want to have consistent revenue. The water and sewer departments are entitled to recover their costs. Fair cost apportionment. Cost of service fairly allocated between customers. Avoidance of undue discrimination. All customers pay a similar amount for the same service. Efficiency, efficient distribution of water and waste. And conservation, pricing signals encourage cost reduction measures and avoid wasteful use of water. The 5 guidelines that establish undue rate discrimination are as follows: unfairness. 2, burdens imposed on some customers as a result of disproportionately low rates charged to other customers. The sewer cap is a classic example of undue rate discrimination. 3, predatory pricing. 4, second best problems, resource misallocation. We have a second best situation that's developed because our overall water use has been reduced because of conservation, buttoning up leaks in the pipes, and that's a good thing. But many customers have left the system and have installed wells because of our high costs. As a result, our cost allocation needs to be, our unit prices need to increase because there's fewer units of water that are being purchased, approximately 15% less than historic. So unless we get this issue resolved, more and more people will go to wells, which will increase the burden to everybody else. So we need to be able to attract users to our system. Otherwise, we'll lose them and then lose that revenue. Problems with the present 220 cap. The additional sewer fees are not paid by choice. The revenue from the additional sewer fees are shared by other members of society. The additional sewer fees are collected to raise additional revenue. For those that exceed the 220 cap, the much lower marginal cost dramatically reduce incentives to conserve. $6.24 per unit versus $3.58 per unit. Persons who have invested in water-saving equipment, toilet shower heads, wells and rain barrels, have a longer payback period. Chapter 41, Section 69B. Water commissioners, powers and duties. The water commissioners or the selectmen authorized to act as such may regulate the use of water and fix and collect just and equitable prices at rates for the use thereof, and shall prescribe the shall prescribe the time and manner of payment of such prices and rates. So by charging people for sewer fees that don't go down the sewer, and then we also have a similar for the sewer fees. So once again, rates have to be established to be just and equitable, and charges shall be assessed in a fair and equitable manner. So the sewer cap is not fair, it's not equitable, it's illegal. And so the concerns about some type of public betterment or people with large houses versus small houses, this is a user fee. It is not a tax. And so just like your electric bills and gas bills, it's just like buying any other commodity. It's a fee, not a tax. Emerson College versus City of Boston established that fees must be fees. They can't be taxes. They all must be cost-based and justified. So any type of user fee needs to be equitable and fair. The fee must be paid by choice. The charges may not be collected to raise additional revenues as such, but to compensate the governmental entity for its expenses in providing the service. The fee must be charged for a particular service that benefits the party paying the fee in a manner not shared by other members of society. So this was an issue with the $360 a year flat fee, is that it is effectively a tax, not a fee. It's in violation of Emerson College versus City of Boston. Once again, we established water and sewer enterprise funds back in 2007. And these funds, once again, must create income or charge fees that are consistent with the standards of Massachusetts general law. Let's see, our present water and sewer rates, $3.58 for water, $2.66 for sewer. Residential customers have a 220 CCF sewer cap. Commercial users and selected residential users are allowed to use irrigation water meters. And so this is clearly a discriminatory policy that has been on the books for decades. And so if we need to have policies that are consistent for all users of water and sewer in our community, we cannot discriminate between commercial users and some selected residential users that do have irrigation water meters. What is the resolve for our water and sewer issues? We need to recognize 4 distinct rate classes: residential, irrigation, small commercial, and large commercial. We need to implement an irrigation billing policy. Establish separate seasonal accounting of interior versus outdoor water use. Provide direct feedback on water consumption. Provide full conservation incentives for both interior and exterior water use. Establish quarterly billing. Establish a water sewer oversight committee to assist the Long Meadow Board of Selectmen. Let us restore fairness, equity, and clarity to our water and sewer rates. Thank you. If there are any questions, please feel free.
Was muted. I was having trouble because I'm on the, I still have control of the screen.
I don't see anybody with, wait, there might be one person with their hand raised. Ted. Let me move Ted over, unless you wanted to start with the select board.
Well, we'll take Ted if he's been there, and then we'll move on. But I think we should probably open the screen up and take, if you could stop sharing the screen, Kurt.
Stop sharing, okay.
Yeah. Great, thank you. All right, so we have Ted, and I think you spoke earlier, Ted, if you could just repeat your name and address.
Yeah, sure. Ted Sluice, 25 Concord Ranch. Just had a quick question. I was just surprised. I think it was slide 20. They had a statement on there that commercial and then surprisingly selected residential customers. I just wonder if you could expand upon that a little more. I was caught a little bit off guard by that statement on that slide.
Yes, there are areas in town where there are cul-de-sacs on streets. And that's clearly a residential use of water, and they are separately watered for their irrigation water. They are not billed sewer fees in those accounts.
When you say cul-de-sacs, is that is it like town property near residences, or these are actual residential property accounts that have this like a separate capability?
These are the cul-de-sac, those circles at the end of streets, and these areas are watered. And once again, it's irrigation water use, and also any commercial customer that wishes to have an irrigation water meter can.
Ted, the property is town property. You have the same issue with who cuts the lawns and who cuts the grass. We've had several of those neighborhoods adopt, if you will, those center islands, and they do the lawn cutting and they irrigate it. They just didn't want to pay sewer bills, so they do pay the water, but they don't pay the sewer bills on watering town property.
Okay, I understand now. Thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it.
And Mark too, I just wanted to add, we probably only have maybe about 8 of those accounts in town. And you are correct, they all are on town property.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Thank you for your question, Tim, or Ted. Any other questions or comments by the select board on Kurt's presentation? Okay, what was
Tom, I did get a question from someone that asked if Kurt would share his slides. I do know that he sent them to us right before the meeting tonight, so we will post those to the town website tomorrow.
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Any other questions? I know that, or comments?
Yeah, Tom, I had one comment, if you don't mind.
Yes.
There's been talk about that set fee, and Kurt pretty well identified the fact that it's most likely illegal since it's not equitable. And I quickly looked at our records while we were chatting. If we implemented a set fee, 3,175, approximately 3,175 of our people would be paying more than they are now for sewage. And if you want that in reference, a normal 2-family unit, a retired couple, normally would use somewhere between 2 to possibly 3 units of water per month. And 2 units a month would be $64 that they're currently paying for sewage. And that proposal would take their sewage flat rate to $360. So that would have a significant, a very, very heavy, significant impact on all the senior citizens in our community if we went towards putting a set fee in for that instead of metering. That's it, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Is Tom Shea still,
Yes, there's I'm moving over, Siobhan Maddie.
okay?
So-
And Siobhan, if you could just give us your name and your address in town.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get it. It's by default always unmuted and not on video. I was at 573 Wolf Swamp Road. I was actually reaching out because was just trying to put it in perspective too. I mean, there are obviously the water sewer charges. We understand that. But it's difficult when I guess that, you know, a lot of it does go down, it does or doesn't affect other people. And sorry, now I'm getting nervous, losing my line of thought there. But I'm also babysitting my niece, so forgive me. It just, there are a couple of things that are hard with that in general. I mean, also like sewer waste, like if you have your own sewer problem, the town is not taking care of that. There are a couple of other things like that, like, you know, in terms of maintenance of the actual sewer line, I don't know who takes care of those things between the home and not. But I do know that as a single person who, you know, does not use very much water, I don't have a family at home, you know, property value also is a huge part. And if you stop taking care of your lawn, property values are going to go down. And if people stop taking care of their landscaping, I mean, the town will not look very good. It's an honest argument there. So I moved into my house in 2018 and they hadn't taken care of the house in years. I mean, it was overgrown. So hire the landscapers, hire the tree company. I'm still working at it. Last year, I tried to just run the sprinklers on a normal schedule. And my water bill was $1,300 and I almost had a heart attack because it was the first time I've ever owned a sprinkler system, used a sprinkler system. And I'm thinking I'm one person. I'm like, what if it's a family? So, you know, and I'm not doing 25 loads of laundry for a baby every day. But that was all the, you know, the commentary was just that I was astounded by just how high that was. And I thought that my bill before that was around $250, like for half of the year, and maybe part of the closing paid for part of the other piece of the year. But the substantial jump from 248 to, you know, 1268 and then to 644 was pretty phenomenal. So that's, you know, I don't know how to help with that, but I'm just saying, you know, if you start telling people not to use water to irrigate their lawns, I understand the conservation issue and the need for water on a regular basis and not overusing your water. But even if you have it on a normal schedule, you know, if people's lawns start to fry out and everything starts to die, it's not going to be a very pretty place either.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments. And I just in support of that, one of the things that we are experiencing in Massachusetts due to climate change is more droughts. We've had more droughts than we've had in the past. And when we have droughts, one of the things that affects are the bigger trees that need regular water. And then if these trees aren't watered, they will topple over, and high winds more likely. So when it's
You're right, though. I actually paid for my neighbor's tree to get cut down because I didn't want it to fall on my house. So it, you know, in that way, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, you know, you go above and beyond sometimes just to make sure nothing bad happens, but that's all.
Right. So I agree with you that water is important to our community, and so we don't want to discourage people from watering. But we want to have a fair and equitable system and encourage.
Understandable, yeah.
Been a great presentation.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you.
So, well, as Mark and Richard, the work they've done. So.
No, the presentations from all of you, from Tom, Kurt, Mark, it's been amazing. You guys have put a lot of work into everything that you've gone through. So thank you. And I'm happy I stayed on, you know, to watch it all. But, you know, it is it is hard. And I know someone had commented before, it is a similar thing. Like, I don't go through trash. I don't go to school. You know, I don't have anybody in school. I understand that. It's like COVID and you wash your hands, you know, but at the same time, you know, but I appreciate everybody's presentations. I think it's amazing, you know, what everybody went through there.
Yeah, Maddie, this is Rich Foster. I didn't catch your address. Could you give me your address, please?
Yeah, 573 Wolfswamp Road.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And I did have a question for Kurt. You had mentioned that perhaps the select board could use some sort of an advisory board. And what was the term you used for that?
Well, a task force committee, a group of residents in town that could go through the details of the water and sewer issues and work with the Board of Selectmen to advise them on best practices. I know that the Board of Selectmen is very, very busy. I'm sorry. Are you able to hear me okay now? So I know the Board of Selectmen are very busy with a whole host of issues that you entertain on a regular basis. And so this group of citizens would be able to put the time in to pursue the details to help better the town on this matter.
Okay. Don, do you happen to know if any other towns have anything like that? Had you ever heard of that before, Kurt?
I know other towns have committees that actually assist with all issues of the DPW.
Okay, all right. All right. So is there any other questions or speakers that we need to address, Lynn?
I don't see anyone with their hand raised. Oh, Tom.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Thank you, Tom. Hey, Tom, thanks for the opportunity and the rest of the select board. And I just ask that, you know, I know Mark was a featured speaker, if you will, and Kurt did. So look, you guys know I put a lot of time and effort into this and you've seen it. I just ask for the same indulgence and I'll try to make it quick. I do not have a PowerPoint. I'll rely on the two others, but I just want to speak on primarily two things. The items there is a consensus on, and then next, steps in implementation, because I think something is going to get done here. So first, consensus. There is a need to change the way Long Meadow bills for sewer charges to make it equitable. And look, we all know it has to change, and equitable means you pay for what you in essence use. So no cross subsidization, which is what's going on now. Secondly, I think we're in agreement on two things. I originally was going to say only one: no secondary meters. If there were to be secondary meters, in essence, there would probably be adverse selection, people that couldn't afford to. And Mark, I get the $850, but I can guarantee you in my house, it would be much more than that, because I'd have to reconstruct my basement, closet, etc. So I think let's take secondary meters off the table. Secondly, fixed fee, that's off the table. It's illegal. Third, what I think we're in agreement on is establishment of what I'm going to call a base non-peak period and not charging sewer fees above this level during the peak period. Whatever is adopted here may need to be tweaked later, and that's either with the advisory board or the water and sewer commissioners a year from now. But let's just all agree, some type of base that can be changed if needed. The fourth thing that has not been stressed here, but I want to stress it, is quarterly billing. The town water and sewer budgets have gone up at an annual rate of 5% and 8% respectively since 2018. This is based on increased charges from Springfield Water and Sewer, as well as expenses in Long Meadow. These charges are likely to go up 6 to 8% a year going forward because of Springfield's capital expenditures, which need to be done, as well as whatever is going to happen in Long Meadow. So this problem that we have will only get worse, and I'm happy we're addressing it now. East Long Meadow, Amherst, Northampton, among others, have quarterly billing. In fact, Springfield is monthly. Numerous suites and task force going back over 10 years have recommended quarterly billing. Quarterly billing will reduce the burden for the ever-increasing bills, up 8% a year. Look, I know the select board, Pete Thurber. Pete, I feel sorry for the two admins in your office. Every time people get a water bill, there's calls. I get calls from the elderly. If there's quarterly bills, it spreads it out. Secondly, when something is implemented here, some people will end up paying more. If there's quarterly bills, it would cushion the impact on the people whose bills would increase in terms of the sewer charges. Also, the increased expenses of billing, and I want to stress this, billing preparation, postage, whatever we need to do, Pete Thurber with Munis, or if you need to create a database from each of the monthly water and sewer readings, that will come out of the water and sewer enterprise funds budget, and people will pay for that. It will not impact the town's tax rate in any shape or form. And if Paul Pasturzik's on, disagree, but this will not impact the town's tax rate, nor should it. Next, just some questions, and I gave you folks this a week ago. I'll address some of it, but first and foremost, budget. To get something done here, it needs to start once the select board, which is the Water and Sewer Commission, vote to approve something. Is there money in the 2020 budget so that work can begin as soon as the order is given to go forward for quarterly billing as well as the base billing methodology? Is there money in the budget, or do we have to do something? Not we, does the select board have to do something now so we don't have to wait until October and go back to town meeting? I don't know if somebody has an answer to that, but I've asked the question, and I think all of us want to get this moving forward. So if we've got feedback on that, I'd appreciate it. Anyone?
Tom?
Yeah,
I'm
you
sorry?
want one, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, Tom, our sewer and water budgets are expense budgets. They're not revenue budgets. We set the revenue based on, here's how much we need to raise. Paul's going to come to us and say, we passed this budget. Here's how much we need to raise. What do you want to charge for rates? Now, he doesn't say, what do you want to charge? He says, how many units are there going to be? So
I know that
structure has nothing to do with the expenditure budget.
So Mark, just two things. Anything that's done here is revenue neutral. However, there is a water and sewer budget that's on the town warrant right now. There is no
It's an
money.
expense budget. It's not a revenue budget.
I realize that, but there is no money in there for Pete Thurber to buy a new Munis system or get a programmer in, or to pay for quarterly billing, or to pay for stamps to send out those bills. So how does it happen between July 1st through next year if those expenses are not in the budget? You can't spend money that's not in the budget, to my knowledge.
If I may add, Paul Pasturzik here, coming back in. The water and sewer budgets do have, each of them have a reserve amount. And the incremental cost of doing quarterly billing, I do not believe would have a grave impact on those reserves. We are talking about additional administrative cost internally for the manpower. The manpower is basically already budgeted for. And then we are talking about some postage and some billings. So I don't think that would have a grave impact on the actual budget, and that's very doable. I do not know what the impact would be to implement some of these different methodologies for sewer billing. So I do not have an answer on whether there's money available in that particular case. Again, as I said, each one of those enterprise funds does have a reserve account of $50,000. So I would hope that there would be ample money in order to address these issues internally with the current budgets that are proposed. But until we have firm numbers, I can't make a commitment one way or another.
Okay, that's fair. I was told that there was 40 to 50,000, and that's to cover broken pipes, et cetera. So thank you. My concern was that there was money to start this, and I think I'm hearing, yes, there's money to start it. And also, I guess maybe there's other ways in terms of reserve money that's within the enterprise funds. So thank you. I just wanted to make sure there would be no delays once something is agreed upon. Second question would be implementation and timing. You know, I guess I would say my goal is that a new sewer-based billing and quarterly billing would be implemented for the quarter ended September 30th, which is 6 months from now. The town already collects monthly water meter readings, as we're all aware. So what we're talking about is the water and sewer commissioners to enact the changes, the base system to be either programmed for a database. I don't think Peter has a database set up right now. Munis, and then quarterly bills to be prepared and sent in October. I would assume that folks need to assess that in terms of the Munis system and what is accomplished here. But I would just say, I would like to hear that at some point we set a goal, and hopefully that would be for September. The next thing would be in terms of methodology, and like I said earlier, you know, my latest was 6 months. Was one of the methods by DPC Consulting. I'm not wed to that, but I think I've heard that the option 2E, which is interesting to me, I don't know if it's ever been used anywhere else, is potentially similar to a 5-month average or 6. I'm just looking for simplicity for people to understand this. And like I said earlier, this could be tweaked going forward. So then I guess finally, what are the next steps? I'm assuming the select board is not going to vote now. You could potentially vote at the next meeting after you've considered this, kind of step back and considered this. The next thing could be to turn it over to the town departments for formal feedback, which it sounds like has started, and that's why I gave you my questions a week ago. And then the last option, which is, I guess, not off the table, would be some sort of task force to look at, let's say, the top 2 or 3 options and then report back to the board. What I would say is, from this point forward, any work going forward needs to be done in an open meeting law format. This has come before the board twice. This is a significant issue for the town. Everything going forward needs to be open meeting. So, like I said, I think we're making very good progress here, and I look forward to getting something done. Thank you for the time, Tom and the select board. Any questions? I'm available for you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So it looks like we're at the point where we could begin to wrap up our meeting. I don't know if anyone on the select board has any other comments before we look for a motion. I know.
Tom, I do have one. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
Steve's got his hand up.
I have a comment. I have several comments. One, I'd like to thank Tom Shea, Kurt Friedman, Richard Foster, and Mark Gold for all the really large and significant work they've done. I mean, this is, I'm not quite sure it was the task force that I thought we had in mind, but, it sort of came together as a task force. One of the things that Tom Shea mentioned was a consensus. I'm not really sure there's a consensus of the board at this stage of the game. And although while I still think some sort of flat fee, because we're all residents of this town, and if we all pay for the pipes that come into our homes, I'm not quite sure it's illegal, but if that's illegal, my feeling is based on everything I've heard, everything I've read, that's been presented, is that option 2E with the maximum winter and 110% over, with the summertime usage, in terms of fairness and implementability, makes the most sense to me at this stage of the game. So those are my thoughts on the matter.
Okay, thank you. And
There is a resident or someone in the chat that would like to speak or ask a question. Are you entertaining?
it's kind of late. I really want to just wrap up the meeting. The board, but
Let him ask the question.
This has gone on for 25 years, as Kurt said. You gotta let the person talk, please. And I have no idea who it is.
all right. Well, hopefully it's not going to take him 25 minutes. Yes.
Let Siobhan back in.
And who's wants to speak?
I'm muted still, sorry.
Well, okay.
So just to hear the clarity of what's going on, it's important. I mean, everybody has given a very good, important opinion, and the work that they've done is incredible. I mean, it really is incredible how much time they've taken to go through all of these things. And clearly, if he said 25 years, of preparing for it, that's incredible. And Mark, Tom, appreciate it. Kurt, same. One thing I was just going to say was, I do also think that the bite might be taken easier with a quarterly billing system. It's just not that. It's just that you're waiting for half a year to take it. So even if it was cut in half and it was the same billing system, it wouldn't matter. It's just shocking when you get that initial bill that's like, that expensive. So that was all I had to say, was that, it's more that it's, you budget out, you're like, oh, my last one was $250, and then somehow it went up to $1,290, and you're like, how did this happen? And I get that everybody had to work from home. There's no doubt about that you're home more. But it is one of those things where I'm like, I think the quarterly billing system would benefit a lot of people, and I think a lot of people would be easier on probably everyone if that was the case. So that was all.
Okay, thank you. And then I don't know if we need any more comments from the select board, or if we could look for a motion to adjourn our next.
No, I have one comment, Tom.
Yes.
I was going to try to talk for another couple hours if possible.
Yeah, I hope you can fit in your schedule.
I can see you're wanting to go home. I think the one light at the end of the tunnel that we saw tonight, or we heard about, that I don't think has been given enough credit, is the fact that Pete Thurber said that Munis apparently does have a winter module or a winter averaging module. And I think we're going to have to take a look at what that is, because if they've already got it, then this conversion becomes immensely simple.
Okay, well, that could be helpful. And again, over all these years, we've managed to get there's new developments that we need to consider everything so we can make the best decision. So yeah, maybe we can hear more about that from Pete in the future. He can look into that. Lynn, you could, follow up on Richard's request to have Pete tell us about that. And then I will look for a motion to end the meeting.
I will move to adjourn the meeting, but before I will emphasize the quarterly billing. I said I'd vote for quarterly billing at the last meeting. I think the quarterly billing makes the most sense. And having said that, I move to adjourn.
And we have a second on the motion?
Second.
Okay. Mike Barbieri, will you please take a roll call vote?
Mr. Lakusa?
Yes.
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Moretz?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
And Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Our next select board meeting is Monday, April 5th at 7 p.m. Good night.